There we go.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Clemence. I'm here at the Clemence School.
There's nobody there yet.
Oh, you just let me know.
Yeah. All right, people joined.
Okay, cool. Good morning, everybody. How are you? So, welcome to the Clemence School. We're here in Santa Monica, just a couple blocks away from the farmers market. I'm really excited to do this Instagram takeover for the next few days and talk to you about all the wonderful things that you can be doing with farmers market fruit right now, because this is my absolute favorite time of year. And we are going to spend some time today talking about canning, like making jam in particular. So we're going to talk about how to sterilize jars, the ratios of sugar and lemon juice to fruit and what pectin is. We're going to talk about how to water bath can, super important. We're going to discuss a lot about safe practices and what you may have done growing up versus like what you should be doing to make sure that your jam doesn't poison anybody, and to avoid things like botulism and other fun things that you really don't want in your jam. So in a few minutes, when some more people hop on, I'm going to get into the sterilization of jars topic. And I'm going to encourage all of you guys to ask questions as much as possible. Claire is our moderator today, so she's standing like in front of me, and I'll introduce you really quickly. You want to come up?
Sure.
So this is Claire. So when we teach our virtual classes here, there's always a moderator. So Claire is standing here, and she's going to be letting me know what your questions are. So feel free to ask any and all questions, and we'll go from there. So how many people do we have right now?
20.
20 people, that's a lot. Okay, so let's get to it. How many of you guys have made jam like really successfully, where you feel like really confident about your canning? Just a general show of hands. And if there's anybody who's like nervous about it, I want to hear like what it is about canning that makes you nervous. And while I'm waiting to like hear what you guys have to say, I'm going to talk to you about different kinds of jars that you can use to make jam with. So right here I have like a really cute little storage jar. This is a ball jar, but it is not appropriate for canning. So cute little storage jars like this, and it'll say on the package like not suitable for home canning or preserving, are really lovely, but they don't have any kind of sealing agent, and they don't have the ability to create a vacuum, which is what we want. After we've made our jam and filled our jars with our jam, we want to create a vacuum seal to get rid of any air that's in there, any oxygen, and any like leftover like pressure from bubbles and things that are going to come out during the vacuum seal. So what we want to do is to get a jar that's appropriate for canning, and there's lots of different kinds of jars. Ooh, can you grab, Claire, one of those jars that has the wheat berries in it, the weck jars? I'm going to show you two different kinds of jars. So this is the traditional American style ball or cur jar, same company really. And it has like a 3-part lid system. Is there the rubber around it? So what's really important to note about this is that this and this are the only 2 parts that are reusable. This part here, this little lid, is not in the least bit reusable. So this seal here only works 1 time. And there are lots of little like gadgets that you can buy in order to sterilize these. But the last I heard is that the ball and cur company are really discouraging you from putting this in hot boiling water and then trying to fish it out with a fork or one of those little like magnetic things, because the last thing you want to do is to disturb this. And so this has to stay 100% sterile. And so you don't want to disturb any part of this orange stuff, which is what seals your jar. So these 2 things, if you're like holding some beads in here or some thumbtacks, you can absolutely reuse it. So many different ways of sterilizing jars. A lot of them are somewhat controversial and some aren't. For me, the most important thing is making sure that there is no crack in the jar whatsoever. So always inspect your jars, even if they come brand new in a package. I've had cases of jars that had cracks in them. Sorry, I've got some jam that's almost done here, and I want to make sure it doesn't burn. So the first thing you do is inspect to make sure that there's no cracks in the jar. And then the second is to wash it really thoroughly. So So even if you get a brand new case, it's good to just wash them with hot soap and water. And then, this is the controversial part. Some people will put this in like the hot part, the steam part of their dishwasher to finish sterilizing and drying. Some people will boil this in boiling water, and sometimes I will do that. But for me, the most important thing is making sure that there is not a drop of water anywhere near my jars, and that they're not picked up with somebody's hands, even if they were in the hot boiling water. So once I've washed these thoroughly, I will put them on a tray that has a towel on it. So remember, like this stuff, you need to keep really sterile and set aside. And then I will put these in a hot oven, like around 250 to 300 degrees for 30 minutes. And this is actually really helpful. We're gonna pretend this oven's open, all right? It's hot today. And we have some IGTV happening. So the jars go in the really hot oven for two reasons. One is I like to save space on the stove, and I also have a really hard time handling, because I don't have a very strong wrist, like very slippery hot boiling pieces of glass. So once I've like sterilized the jars and made them really hot and totally clean, I will put them in the oven to dry completely, rather than flipping upside down or using a towel to clean them out. Like that feels less sterile to me than finishing them off in the oven. So my phone's on, which is fine. That's cool. So that's how I dry the jars. Does anybody have any questions right now about the sterilizing of the jars? Nope? Awesome. So this is a WEC jar. This is a European style jar. We're using them to hold Tef right here for injera, but I don't have a little rubber seal, but you may see these. So there's an Italian company that makes these. This is a German company, and you'll see a rubber seal that goes here. Actually, it goes around this, and then you pop it here, and you have these two little snap things that hold everything together. What I like about this system is that the rubber is reusable. So you can, as long as there's no crack in it. Yeah, Claire, we have a question.
Sayulita 26 asked, can you just sterilize in the oven?
You technically no. So there, the USDA Master Food Preserver Program would tell you no, like you need to do it in hot boiling water. So I like to sterilize my jars and then I put them in the oven, because for me the most important part about preserving is preventing the things that allow mold and bacteria and yeast and mold and all those things to form, and that's primarily water. And so I don't want any even hint of water to be left on my jars. So I like to wash them and sterilize them and then put them in the oven to stay hot until I'm ready to fill them with the jam. So this would be like the European system of doing it. And again, unlike these where you have to keep buying this part, every time you make jam, you wouldn't have to do that with these. If you see cracking in that rubber seal, get rid of it and get a new one, okay? So another note about this really fast, you can buy sets of these, and then this is reusable because it's really only there to adhere this to your jar. So once you've sterilized your jar, you've filled it, you're gonna put this whole system onto the top of the jar. But this is just there to hold it in place. And so once your jars are fully cooled, like 24 hours after they've cooled, you can remove these and your jars are just fine. Any questions before we move on to talk about the science of jam? Okay, cool. All right, so that is the jar talk and the sterilizing talk. I really like to make sure there's as much real estate on my stove as possible. Which is why I don't like to have a lot of hot boiling water and a mess of taking hot, wet jars out of boiling water while I'm also making the jam. So this is nice because it saves you some space, and when you're ready, take them out of the hot oven, you're gonna fill the jars with the hot jam. Okay, so let's talk about what jam is. So jam is not this 1,000-year-old tradition. More modern jams and preserves really only came into being a little over 100 years ago when a French chemist developed the first tempered glass jar. You have is there a question?
Yes. Sources for the Euro jar, what's the brand?
Oh, so the European style jars, we use WEC, W-E-C-K. We carry them here at Gourmandise in the store. I think we have a shipment coming in a little bit. But you can get them online, and Keith Ceramics also carries them. But yeah, and they're really beautiful. And what I like about them is their shape, so they stack really well versus the mason jars that don't really stack very well. So these stack nicely.
Another question is today about canning. Just heard you say jam. What jam is on top of the stove? Do you have a recipe for elderberry jam or syrup or anything elderberry?
Elderberry.
Excuse me.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so what I have here is apricot jam. I got some beautiful Blenheim apricots about 3 weeks ago from a friend of mine up in Three Rivers near Florabella. And so that's the apricot jam. And yes, I love elderflower. And so on our website, we have a blueberry elderflower jam recipe. So
We also have an elderberry syrup from that cake.
oh yeah, we have an elderberry syrup. Yeah, we had to recreate the royal pudding cake for a morning news show a couple years back. And so we do also have an elderberry syrup recipe for that. So if you have any other questions about jam, I'm going to talk about it. But I really, really want you to understand that knowing the ratios of different fruits to sugar and lemon juice is all you need for a jam recipe. So let's talk about that.
Try to speak up. Let's see if I can
Okay.
get loud for you.
Got it. So I'm told I need to be louder. So I'm going to be a little louder. So making jam again is about preserving fruit. And you do that by taking fruit that's at its peak of flavor and you preserve it by adding lemon juice and sugar in order to do a couple things. 1, to draw the moisture out of the fruit. 2, to let that moisture evaporate. And 3, to help the molecules called pectin form a web. And I create this like web thing whenever I talk about gluten, which is a really not a bad word here, it's a very good thing. But it also is a really interesting thing to talk about with regards to pectin. So pectin is this carbohydrate that's found in fruit. It's very significant in fruits like cranberries and citrus, where you have an incredible amount of pectin, which is why cranberry sauce looks really like thick and like Jell-O, and why marmalades are really thick. And so everything we're doing when we're making jam is about removing moisture, so bacteria can't thrive, and 2, to encourage those pectin molecules to form a web to trap moisture and suspend fruit. There are a couple of questions, it sounds like.
If apricots were 3 weeks old, were they frozen or kept in fridge to prevent ripening?
Oh, good question. So the first question is about apricots. So we made this jam a while ago, and this is my magic of television. We cut them up and macerated them overnight with sugar and lemon juice, and we cooked it into a jam. And this jam is actually finished. So it was frozen, and then I just brought it out to like cook it down for you and show you how to fill a jar with jam.
Can you use frozen fruit?
Can you use frozen fruit? That is a really good question that we get a lot. So the answer is yes. And this is where there's a caveat. So when you buy fruit that's out of season, it's usually brought in from really far away. And so it's picked way before it's ripe, and it doesn't have the kind of sweetness that you get when you get it when it's in season. So when fruits are out of season, use them frozen. When fruits are in season, get them from as close to the source as possible. So try not to make jam from like Costco strawberries because they're going to be picked way before they're ripe. They're going to have a white collar around them that you're going to have to cut out. So you're not by any means saving money. But we're here, on behalf of the Santa Monica Farmers Market, and so I'm going to encourage you to really only make jam from fruit that you're buying at its peak. So as close to the source as possible, as close to the time that it was picked as possible. So right now, this is the most exciting time of year for making jam for me because I'm not thinking about the jam I'm eating today. What I'm thinking about is like those dreary days in February when you're just really over making all desserts with oranges and pears and apples, as wonderful as they are. And so when I open up a jar of apricot jam with like big chunks of apricots suspended in the jam, like in February, it makes my day. So what I'm trying to do right now is capture the best of what's happening at the farmer's market and then preserve it so that in January or February, I have something to eat other than chocolate, which is not a terrible thing, but yeah, so that's what we're doing. Any other questions?
Someone who can't eat sugar, could you use other alternatives such as honey or fruit juice?
jam, and what we're talking about today is making jam that is going to sit on your shelf for 6 to 12 months. And it's sanctioned candy. In my house, jam is not a health food. It is something that's really lovely and wonderful, and it's a way to preserve the best of fruit at room temperature until I'm ready to eat it in 6 to 12 months. So I'm going to tell you all those safety practices to make that happen. If you are looking for a low sugar jam, you have a couple of options. One is you can just take fruit and freeze it. Two, you can cook fruit down with a little bit of honey or whatever sweetener you like, and then freeze that as well. You can refrigerate it, but the refrigerator is not going to make your fruit last 6 months. So freezing is a better option. There's a really great book by the Food in Jars author named Marissa McClellan. So she has a really great canning book called Naturally Sweet Food in Jars. And she has a lot of very safe recipes that call for additional pectin. We'll talk about why in a little bit. For low sugar jams, low cane sugar jams. But know that different sugars have different burning points. That means that they're going to burn quicker or more slowly based on how processed they are and what their chemical makeup is. So not all sugars are created the same, and not all alternative sugars are less processed than cane sugar. Any other question? Another question?
Can you make jam ahead and freeze it and then bring it out to reheat in can?
Yes, you can make jam and freeze it immediately, and then you can reheat it, get it to 220 degrees before you put it in your jars and process them. But you want to make sure that you never make jam, especially if you're doing a low sugar jam, and let it sit out, because the lower the amount of sugar, the higher the ability for yeast and mold and bacteria to grow, because those things really, really thrive in a low sugar environment. Part of it has to do with the fact that sugar likes to draw water to itself and make it unavailable for things like yeast and mold to grow. So it's hydrophilic, which means it loves water. Any other questions?
You freeze hot?
Can you freeze hot? You should never put anything hot in your freezer. It's really dangerous for the other foods in your fridge or freezer. Same thing with the refrigerator. Don't make hot soup and cool it down in the fridge, because everything else in your fridge, especially your proteins, are going to get to that danger temperature where bacteria can grow. So it's not always about the food that you're cooling down, it's about the environment in your refrigerator.
So I think that was referring to the question about freezing right away.
Oh, I see what you mean about freezing right away. So I bring it to room temperature and then I freeze it. And a lot of times here at the school, it looks really big, but we don't have a lot of shelf space for storing jars of jam. I have this little shelf right here. It's pretty much it. We have, hold on, I'll show it to you. So we have our vanilla extract and our preserved lemons here. There's not a lot of room for the gallons of jam that we have. So we actually cool jam down and we put it in deli cups, like those little plastic containers, and we freeze our jam. And that's because we don't have a lot of shelf space. So you can also freeze the jam and take it out, and the minute that you open it up, take it out of the freezer, you need to refrigerate it, and it'll keep for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the ratio of sugar and lemon juice that you've used. All right, so let's talk about sugar and lemon juice and pectin. So we covered a little bit what pectin is. It's this molecule, it's a carbohydrate. Oh, we're gonna do this?
I'm gonna try to see if
All right.
this will work. We're
We're gonna see if we can get some better audio here.
But there's gonna be a cord actually, so there's kind of no point in doing that.
Okay, maybe not. So pectin is this molecule, and it really likes attracting water. So you have these pectin molecules that are floating about, and pectin is found in the skin and in the core of fruit. So some fruits, again, are really high in pectin, like cranberries, quince. You ever have membrillo? Same texture as cranberry sauce once it's all gelled up and put in that tin can. And so when you start to break those down, those pectin molecules are just looking for water. But when you add sugar and acid, those two things like to draw the water out, and it make those pectin molecules more likely to bond to each other to create that mesh. And that mesh is what we want to suspend. It's basically like a little bit like a starch. It kind of suspends all the liquid and makes it unavailable for bad bacteria and mold to grow. So that's what we're doing when we're making jam. You're thinking, oh, I'm just putting some fruit and sugar and lemon juice in a pot, but actually you're encouraging pectin molecules to stick to each other, and you're encouraging moisture to evaporate. And that's really key, and that's when I want to talk to you about the kind of vessel that you're making your jam in. I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and buy this gorgeous copper pot. we got this lovely copper pot from a company called Moviel, but this one is my great-grandmother's. So copper lasts a really long time. It's a really great conductor of heat. You don't have to have a copper pot to make jam. What you have to have is a wide surface area for wide evaporation of moisture. So if you've got like 2 big flats of strawberries and you want to make jam, and the only pot in your house is a tall and narrow stock pot, you cannot make jam. You'll end up burning the stuff at the bottom, and there's not enough wide surface area to let water evaporate in order for the jam to set. So it's really important to use the widest pot that you have. My general rule of thumb is I don't really love having more than 4 inches of fruit in my pan. So sometimes all I have is a Dutch oven, and I'll just make a smaller batch of jam in the Dutch oven. But the key is to have a really wide pot, and so jam pots like this are more narrow at the base and really wide on the top. I have a very small kitchen at home. If any of you watched our bread videos from the beginning of the pandemic, you saw like 90% of my kitchen, and it took up this much space. So this is so beautiful that I hang it in the living room as like an art piece when I'm not using it to make jam. But it's also what I use to make fried chicken. So if you're looking for, if you make a lot of donuts or fried foods at home, this is also a really good vessel. So I'm done with the pitch about the copper pot. But the idea here is the wide surface area to let as much water evaporate as possible. Because water is really the enemy here. We really don't want any moisture in our jam because that'll encourage bacteria and mold to grow. Any other questions? Okay.
Somebody says, I have a small kitchen too, Valley Girl Foodie, and FMKTJOD says beautiful.
Okay, good. Yeah, they are beautiful. And this one's like over 100 years old. They last forever. So Moviel, we do sell these here, but you can also pick them up at like estate sales and yard sales, and they'll last like your entire life. And they're just really pretty to have.
Do you boil your lids?
Do I oil my lids? Boil. You know, I used to, and then Ball, the company that makes these jars, began recommending not doing that. And that's because this little part here cannot get disturbed in any way, shape, or form. So when you buy these, they are sterilized. And again, the jar, whatever jar you're using, this is not a jar for canning, but your jar is totally reusable, as is the ring, but this is not. This can only be used one time. So even if you're restoring thumbtacks, like, do not reuse this. Use it sterile. And if I was to put this in boiling water or in the oven, then this lid here would begin to deteriorate. And this like waxy seal here is really what's most important about taking our jams and putting them on the shelf for 12 months. It's what seals everything up. So I only want this to get hot once. And so when I take my hot jar and fill it with a hot jam and I put this on it, I'm gonna get a nice tight seal. But if I was to disrupt it or like pick it up or like mar this in any way, then I would be disrupting some of the seal. And I hope that answers your question.
Somebody said they have a hard time cleaning the copper pans.
Hard time cleaning
The copper pans.
Oh, the copper pans. I fill my copper pan with hot water and a little bit of baking soda if there's stuff stuck at the bottom. But there is a guy at the Calabasas Farmers Market who, if you have a pan that's lined with copper or that has some dings in it, he actually restores copper pans. I don't remember his name, but you can Google Calabasas copper guy, and I think you'll find him. He's very French.
Somebody asked, how do you sterilize the rubber on the WEC jars?
How do you sterilize the rubber on the WEC jars? I put in boiling water, a couple seconds. Okay, but try like the 4th or 5th time you're gonna make jam with that rubber seal, it's gonna begin to crack, and then don't use it again. So when I buy those WEC jars, I buy also a pack of those rubber seals, just so that when I wanna make jam again, I know that I have a few extra.
Do you flip your jars to cool and to help seal?
I do not flip my jars to cool, and that is actually a really important question. I wanna do as little as possible to disrupt this orange stuff, okay? So when I flip my jars, that could get jam in between the seal and the glass, which I want to avoid. So I'm gonna show you how to fill the jars in a little bit. Can you bring me a 1/4 cup measuring cup and those grabber things? Okay, so while Claire is grabbing a couple things, and she'll be back in a little bit, so if you have questions, I'll hear them when she comes back. I'm gonna talk to you about the fruit. So this is the peak of stone fruit season. Nothing makes my heart happier than cherries right now, and nectarines and peaches and My daughter works at the Andy's Orchard stand, so we've been really, really lucky to get our hands on some nectarines and things. And when I make jam, I am looking to get the best tasting fruit that's perfectly ripe and that is not bruised, because again, I'm looking to curb bacterial growth. And I'm generally, just for my personal preference, I'm not looking for fruit that has a super high water content. So if I've got a gorgeous white nectarine and it's like very juicy and very floral, two things to note. One is jam is all about reducing moisture, so you're gonna get a lot less yield from a very, very juicy nectarine than you are from a slightly firmer peach, like an O. Henry, for example, which comes later in the season. O. Henrys aren't in right now. But the other factor is that any fruit that has a very subtle flavor is gonna lose some of that in here. So anything that I'm eating that is like so lovely with like a hint of something is not something that I would use to make jam. There are some fruits, like my favorite fruit in the whole world is a Persian mulberry. I think we have some. I can bring it in that paper bag right there. It is so special and it's so delicate that it is not something that I would ever preserve. Because when I'm cooking this down, I'm gonna lose everything that's special about it. So I have to show you, this is a Persian mulberry. So right now there are 3 vendors selling Persian mulberries at the market on Wednesday especially, and that's Weiser, Tenerelli, and Garcia. I'm sure there's a couple more that I'm forgetting, so feel free to chime in. I know Jody's listening right now. So this is a Persian mulberry, 2 kinds of mulberries. We're totally off track right now, but I have to talk about mulberries. One is a Pakistan mulberry, and it's long, and it's very lavender-ish. Sometimes it's really dark. When you eat it, it's like really lovely and floral, but it doesn't have the insanity of flavor that a Persian mulberry has. So Persian mulberry is just this. And every year for a couple weeks, Alex Weiser sells a couple of the mulberry trees. I bought one a couple years ago, so now I have some mulberries outside my yard, but still got some from him this weekend. So if you can, grab some mulberries and eat them now, but it is not something that's worth canning because the flavor is so delicate. It almost has no pectin in it whatsoever. Pectin is really like what makes jam set and nice and thick, and so you would have to use a lot of lemon juice and a lot of sugar in order to make a mulberry jam. So not my favorite thing to can, but for 3 weeks every year, like all I eat is mulberries, and it makes a great lipstick stain, like whatever, it's so good. All right, so back to jam. I feel like I've said that 1,000 times. On our website, we're gonna post it at the end of this, and then Claire, I'm gonna have you make a couple of edits, but we have a chart on how much lemon juice and sugar you should use for a particular kind of fruit. So every fruit has a different natural level of acidity and sweetness. And even in peaches, like there's variations from peach to peach. So you need a different amount of sugar and lemon juice in order to preserve it and make jam safely. And again, jam is sanctioned candy. I'm not talking to you about like a really healthy compote that you can keep for 2 or 3 days in the fridge or in the freezer. So this is jam that's gonna set on the shelf for 6 to 12 months at room temperature. And in order to do that, you need the right ratio of sugar and lemon juice to reduce the ability for mold and bacteria to grow.
When the fruit is juicy, why does the flavor of the fruit not come out as much in the jam?
When the fruit, like the question is like when the fruit's juicy, why doesn't the flavor come out? Those are 2 separate things. When the fruit is really, really juicy, you're gonna be cooking it down for a lot longer. So your yields, the amount of jam you're gonna get is much less. On the flip side of that, when you have a fruit that has really delicate flavors, for me it's like the Pegasus nectarine over at Andy's Orchards right now. It is not something that's gonna shine in the jam because you're cooking it for so long that all of those like really delicate notes are not going to be revealed as strongly in the jam as when you eat it fresh. So some fruits, like, just have at it right now. Just spend the next 4 weeks eating nothing but like incredible stone fruit from the farmers at the market, and then take like the most intensely flavored ones and turn them into jam. So for me, that's yellow peaches, apricots, anything that's gonna hold up and produce something that's high in acid and high in sugar. So I'm looking for all the brightness. possible. I don't know if that makes sense, but when I'm looking to make jam, I really want to take something that's going to shine in those dreary winter months. So let's talk about fruit. Okay, we're going to do this. So I have a couple of nectarines here, and these are seconds. So I'm actually not going to use these to make jam, but I needed to show you a couple of them to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So I'm going to fully dry them. These are seconds, and Claire came up with a really brilliant idea when we were thinking about like what we were going to do during this IG takeover, and I was like, so many ideas swirling, and she said like, why don't we just talk about seconds and what kind of desserts you can make from them. So we're going to be taping a little segment that will air later about how to make cobblers and crisps with fruit seconds. But seconds are slightly visually distressed fruits that you can get from farmers. Maybe they're underripe, maybe they're overripe. And when they're underripe, I use them for jam. We'll talk about that in a second, but when they're overripe, I do not. So when fruit is bruised or damaged or has some funk to it, it is not what you want to use to make jam. So I always inspect my fruit first, and then I like to first determine whether the stone fruits are freestone or clingstone. Freestone fruits mean that they come free off the pit. Clingstone means that the flesh is stuck to the pit. Generally speaking, this is an overgeneralization, but the earlier stone fruits are clingstone and later on they're freestone. So this right here is a slightly underripe yellow peach. I really, really like adding 3 to 4 underripe pieces of fruit to my jam because the pectin content is much stronger in underripe fruits than in fruits that are very ripe. And again, pectin is that molecule that helps to create binding to suspend fruit and make your jam set, right? So it makes it more unavailable for water to be available for back things to grow, and it helps your jam to get really thick. Some fruits have a lot of pectin in them, some have fewer, but even in the arc of a fruit's life, it has varying degrees of pectin. So in the beginning, it has way more pectin, and as it ripens and begins to rot, it has less pectin. So adding a couple pieces of underripe fruit to your jam of the same fruit, of the same variety, is helpful in getting the jam to set faster. Any questions about that?
I had a question from the same person about the flavor of the fruit coming out.
Yeah.
She said she had 2 batches of the same fruit, and the second batch she did was the flavor of the fruit, even the smell, was much less pronounced, and she's trying to understand why. Could it have been the size?
So if you're having variations in the fruit from jam to jam, there's a couple of reasons. It usually has to do with acidity. So taste your fruit before you make your jam, and if it doesn't have enough brightness for you, add more lemon juice. It's very, very simple. But from week to week, you're gonna get different flavors from different farmers. So Murray Farms has the very first cherries every year in the entire Northern Hemisphere. And the first week of cherries, everyone's like, cherries are here. It's like the start of spring/summer. And we're so excited. And then we eat when we're like, this didn't really taste like the best cherry I had this year. But 2 weeks later, it's the best cherry you've ever had in your life. So with a particular fruit, you're going to get a variation in flavor from week to week because there's the first harvest, the second, the third, the fourth. It depends what it is that you're buying. So taste your fruit and adjust. It's just like with cooking, right? As long as you have the right ratio of sugar and lemon juice, you can add more sugar or you can add more lemon juice on top of the recipe in order to bring out what you want from it. All right, so making jam is all about the right ratio of fruit to lemon juice. Lemon juice is incredibly important. You need acidity to change the pH so that bad bacteria can't grow, and it really does help the pectin to form as well. So when it comes to lemons, I prefer using Eureka's or like a classic lemon than a Meyer lemon. And that's because Meyer lemons are not as acidic as Eureka's or some of your other lemon varieties. And that's because Meyer lemons are a hybrid of a lemon and an orange. So not as much acidity, which affects the safety of the jam, in my opinion. And I really like brightness in my jam. Like for me, that's like a good jam should not be puckery, but it should definitely like excite your palate. And so you want a good jam, a good lemon. I just cut my lemons and I juice them. I do everything by weight. So a scale is a really, really important tool when you're making jam. I'm not a big believer in a lot of kitchen gadgets. So in our kitchens here, like you're not gonna find an egg separator and an avocado slicer, but you will find a scale, a couple good pots, some sheet pans, and the one tool I recommend, which is this. And this is because I don't do very well with my hand and my wrist. And so this grabber tool is the one kitchen gadget, other than a cherry pitter, that I recommend everybody have if they're into baking and stuff. So I lift up my jars, not the wet ones, but pretend these are hot, okay? Magic of television. So once I've filled my jar, I pick it up like this with a grabber tool and I take it in and out of the hot boiling water. Any questions right now?
No, but
No?
the person with the fruit says so helpful, thank you.
Okay, good, awesome. Yeah, and taste your fruit and talk to the farmers. I know it's really hard right now to have conversations with our farmers because of all of the social distancing. So just try to keep them really direct, but message them on Instagram. If you have Instagram, you probably do because you're on here right now. But I regularly will message farmers when I want a large quantity of something. So if you're making jam, just contact your favorite peach farmer or strawberry grower and pre-order so that you can pick up at the market. It's also would make things a lot easier rather than like wandering for a really long time at the farmer's market.
How do you pick the wet jars?
How do you find wet jars?
Lift.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, it's hard. I don't have an answer for you. I will usually, no, that doesn't work either. So I will usually process my wet jars in the hot boiling water. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. And then I let the water cool completely. And then I have like this silicone glove that I use like on the grill. And then I use that to pick up the jars because this isn't wide enough for this size wet jar. You don't want it to disrupt the seal in any way. Let's talk about peeling versus not peeling, and a lot of this is personal preference stuff. So I don't ever peel my fruit. I'm a big lover of texture, and pectin is found in the skin and in the core of fruits. So I'm gonna have a jam that sets better if I leave the skin on. You definitely wanna wash your fruit really, really well. And try not to wash the fruit under running water. We're in a drought still, and it can bruise the fruit, especially if you're dealing with strawberries. So I like to wash my fruit in a bowl of cold water and then just like get on any little bits. Like if there's any crevices that you see something in, just like take them off with your hands. And then once my fruit is really well cleaned, then I will cut it. And again, entirely personal preference with size you cut your fruit. I really love big chunks of fruit, again, in that like dreary winter when I pick up my apricot jam and I just get like a big like apricot half in there. So I just like to cut chunks like this. And then about a third of my fruit I will cut into much smaller pieces. So I have a variation of size. So it's not just like big chunks of fruit suspended in syrup. So this is the size I like to do it. Again, I don't peel my fruit. If you like to peel it, great. Blanch your fruit in hot boiling water and then take the skin off. It's just going to take longer and more acid and sugar for your jam to be able to set and be nice and thick. So I've never had a problem with like peel in my jam. Like it just kind of disintegrates a little bit. And it still produces a really lovely jam. Like all these apricots, you can still see some of the speckles from the Blenheim apricots on some of this. But it is not a bad thing to leave the skin on your fruit. Does anybody have questions about other kinds of jam before I move on to talk about the cooking process and the water bath canning? Nope? Cool. Great. Okay. So I cook my fruit down. I've cut it up and I add the right amount of sugar and lemon juice to the fruit. And then I cook it in my wide pan until it begins to boil. So my method is to bring everything to a heavy boil, not stirring very often. Question?
Fig jam?
Fig jam. I love fig jam because I'm not a huge lover of figs on their own. So I'll talk about fig jam in just a little bit because that's a really good point to bring up. Figs are really high in sugar and low in water, and fig jam can burn really quickly. So when you're making jams, like with plums and figs and things that tend to cook really fast as well, you're going to need to stir pretty much the whole time. For all other fruits, I bring it up to a heavy boil because there's plenty of water available everywhere. And then once it's a heavy boil, I turn the heat down and begin to stir consistently almost the whole time. The less water there is in your jam, so the more you cook it down, the more you have to really like scrape and move about so that the fruit doesn't like stick and burn. So, question?
What about passion fruit jam?
Oh, passion fruit jam, that's a really good question. I don't make passion fruit jam, but I add passion fruit to like strawberry jam or to peach or nectarine. Because passion fruit is really, all you're getting is the juice, the liquid, so you can add commercial pectin and turn that into a passion fruit jelly if you want. Jelly is only made from fruit juice and pectin. It doesn't have any pieces of fruit in it. And jams and preserves have varying degrees of sizes of pieces of fruit in it. So passion fruit is something I like to add. Like passion fruit and peach jam is so, so good. Passion fruits are out of season right now, so there are a couple of farmers on Saturday that are selling frozen passion fruit juice, and I believe that JJ's lone daughter, Laura Ramirez, may have some. But it's a lovely addition to strawberry and to peach. I love it when passion fruits are in season and the strawberry season is just beginning. So on Wednesdays, like in about March, you'll see Rincon with his chermoyas and passion fruits, and then there's the eggs, and then you have Gloria Tamai with her kind of like first iteration of strawberries. And I take those strawberries that are not like at their super high peak, they're not real acidic and sweet yet, but if you pair that with passion fruit, you end up with a lovely like strawberry passion fruit jam. So sometimes you can help things by adding something in there. And I don't take away lemon juice when I'm adding passion fruit. It's something I'm adding it. Yeah.
One more question. How do you find the general proportions for sugar and lemon by fruit type?
Okay, so the proportions for lemon to sugar to fruit can be found in many different places. Like we have a chart on our website, and we'll post it at the end of this session. But thegourmandischool.com, and you go to blog and scroll down, and you'll find our Canning 101. You can even do it in the search box. But also the University of California Master Food Preserver Program, which I did many years ago with a couple of your favorite jam makers in town, has a really good chart as well. Their jams tend to be slightly higher in sugar than maybe mine are, but sugar is really, really important. And I'm gonna, if you're going to keep your jam on the shelf for like 6 to 12 months, or in the refrigerator for any certain amount of time, you want to make sure that you are using the appropriate amount of sugar and lemon juice. Again, if you're gonna do low sugar jams, you're gonna need to add pectin, which I don't love doing because you get kind of a chalky, not like natural consistency to your jam, or you're gonna need to freeze your jam. Okay.
One more question. Hibiscus jam.
Hibiscus jam. Again, hibiscus is something that I would use to infuse. So you've got lovely hibiscus flowers. I would dry them and then do a process called infusing. So I wasn't going to talk about this till later, but it sounds like everybody's asking the kinds of questions that would lead to this. And that is the process of letting your jam infuse and macerate overnight. Typically when I'm making jam, unless I got to do it right away because I have time, I will do half the jam making the day before, and then I'll continue on the second day. And what I do is I cut up all my fruit, I add all the sugar and all the lemon juice, toss it all together with the fruit, and let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. And this process is really good if you want to infuse your jam with anything. My favorite infusion is lemon verbena with nectarines. So I put a few pieces of lemon verbena in that bowl that's got everything in there and let it sit overnight, and that will infuse the jam, and I'll pull those leaves out. I don't want any like leaves of, lemon verbena in the jam. So I just kind of let it sit overnight. You can do that with strawberry and hibiscus. You can do it with chipotles and strawberry, actually, which is really delicious. Thyme and peach. But avoid things that are going to mask and use things that are going to be complementary. So one of my biggest pet peeves is cinnamon. If you've ever taken one of our pie classes in the summertime, in the peach pie class, I love the smell of cinnamon. It's intoxicating, it's like very warming. But cinnamon is going to neutralize everything that's special about fresh fruit. So it's lovely with apples, especially in the winter, or if apples aren't like really lovely in flavor. But it's very warm, and it's going to cancel out all the brightness and acidity of your peaches and your peach pie and your peach jam. So things that are complementary are some herbs, maybe some flowers, but be wary of spices that can really take over and instead of complementing, kind of mask everything that's really special about the fruit that you're using. Is there another question? Okay, let's keep moving. So macerating overnight, like the sugar, the lemon juice, the fruit, like whatever infusions I want or don't want in there. Peppercorns are really fun things to do. And then I take all that fruit with the sugar and the lemon juice and drop it in this pot here. And what I like about that method is that overnight, the sugar and the lemon juice are going to attack the cell walls of the fruit and begin to draw the water out. And so when you put it over your stove, you're going to be cooking it down less, so for a lesser amount of time than if you were to just start this process right over the stove. It's nice, it kind of breaks things up a little bit. But the really important part is making sure that your jars are fully sterilized and that they're hot, so that don't sterilize them the night before. Do it right before you're gonna fill your jars with the hot jam. All right, so over here, this is my apricot jam. I'm gonna turn the heat back on. It's done and it's pretty much set. Apricot has a really hard time setting because it's incredibly low in pectin. So I use a lot of lemon juice and quite a bit of sugar when I'm making apricot jam in order to encourage the pectin molecules to bind together and create like a stronger mesh. So in here I had the sugar, the lemon juice, and the apricots. I did some apricots halves, some quarters, and some little pieces so that I have a variety in there. And you want to get your jam to about 220 degrees. Like that's when you know most jams are set. It's incredibly important for marmalades and things to hit that temperature, but ideally 220 degrees. If you have a thermometer, it's great. Also, I have a good visual cue with a spoon. So can you grab me a little metal spoon? I'm going to show, or a couple of them. So I had cut up my fruit, added the lemon juice and the sugar, cooked it down till it was boiling, like really rapidly boiling on high heat, and then I turned it down. I'm turning it down and scraping more and more frequently because there's less water now in the jam, and so it can burn a lot more easily. So things aren't going to burn when there's a lot of water everywhere, but they will burn once the water evaporates and the sugar is much more concentrated. So what I'm trying to do is to see if there's a gel set. And so I pick up a metal spoon and I do this. Can you see it well on the screen? Let me make sure.
Again.
Like this. So see how all the fruit is dropping, but the juice has this pregnant pause here? I think Claire's going to bring the camera over so you can see more clearly. So I take a little metal spoon and I pick up jam and sort of hold it like this. I'm watching all the fruit fall off, but the liquid that's suspended here has this like pregnant pause on the spoon. It's not dripping down. If I was to pick this up and everything was dripping and very wet, the jam would not be set. But the jam is set because I'm getting this sort of pregnant pause here. Everything looks suspended on the spoon, and it's only now beginning to drop.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How would you treat a chili jam, jalapeno pasilla habanero, for example?
So chili jam, usually those are jellies. So when you see like chili or jalapeno jam, that's typically a jelly, and you want to use some pectin usually with that. I think a really good resource for that would be the Food in Jars blog. Look her up. Other question?
Somebody's sending a request to be in our live video.
Okay, no, that's usually a mistake. Okay, all right, so my jam is set, right? I want to make sure it's a little bit hotter. And again, this is a little bit of magic of TV here. But I want to show you how to fill hot jars with hot jam and very safely water bath can them. So I'm going to move this over.
What's the best cooking vessel besides copper pots?
So the best cooking vessel besides a copper pot is any wide, non-reactive pot. So non-reactive is important. Don't use aluminum because it's reactive with the lemon juice in your jam. But very few of our pots and pans are now aluminum. I think like when I was first in college, I probably had a set of aluminum pans from IKEA, and then I graduated to stainless steel. Most of them are going to be stainless steel. What you want to watch out for is a Dutch oven that is not enameled. So if you're going to use a Dutch oven, you want to make sure that it's got that ceramic enamel coating on the inside, because if it doesn't and it's just the cast iron part, it is reactive. So a non-reactive pot that's really wide. Claire is giving us, is going to bring over a Dutch oven so you can see. So copper pot, really lovely, wonderful thing to do. But this is a Dutch oven that's enameled, hopefully. There you go. So right here. This is a really good vessel. But again, no more than about 4 inches of fruit. So don't do like a big batch of jam in here, because there's not enough surface area for that amount of depth of fruit in order for the fruit to set. All right. So, what's that?
Lodge.
Yeah, oh yeah, that one was Lodge. So you can buy very expensive French ones. I'm French and I love the French brands. But Lodge produces a really lovely Dutch oven that's about $80. We have them in this kitchen. We've had them for like 9 or 10 years and they work really, really well. And yeah, it's really lovely. So, all right, I'm going to move some stuff out of the way here. I really like to make sure when I'm getting ready to process my jars that everything else is moved away and sterile. I'm really cautious that you should do this in a like 2-step program where you've got your fruit, you've cut it up, you're cooking it. While it's cooking, you're going to remove everything away so that when you're filling your hot sterile jars with hot jam and you put it in the water bath, there's no opportunity for bacteria to get in there. One thing that's really, really important to note is how careful you should be when you're making jam, and that there shouldn't be anything else going on. So you don't want to be like making jam and somebody walks by with a hot dog and is like eating the hot dog near you, or like anything that you don't want to get inside your jam, especially if you're going to be storing your jam on the shelf, like to be shelf stable. So I like to just make jam its own thing. I'm not making jam and bread at the same time. I'm eating them together, but they're not made together. And so there's no contamination. So I'm going to move some stuff out of the way here so that I can show you how to get the jam in the jars. Hang on a second. All right, so pretend like this pan of jars is really hot. Woo, so hot out of the oven. They've been sterilized in hot boiling water, like I washed them with soap, and then I dried them and kept them hot in the oven, okay? Do you have a 1/4 cup measuring cup? May I see that? Yes. And then, thank you. And then I want to fill the jars to a very specific point, and I want to use a sterile instrument to do that. So I always have, this is our water bath canner. I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to sterilize this by putting my little measuring cup here in boiling water. I really like to use a 1/4 cup measuring cup. I've just found that's the perfect thing for wide and narrow mouth jars. And I want to make sure that there's no water left on this sucker, so I'm just drying it off. Let's look at the anatomy of the jar really quickly. You'll notice if you tilt your jars that at one point you have 3 lines here on the jar. I don't know if you can see. And what I want to do is to fill the jam just to the bottom of that middle line. If you underfill your jam, you're left with a lot of air. And oxygen is not great for food preservation. So you want to fill it up, but if you fill it too high, when you create the vacuum seal and your top domes down a little bit, gets concave, then you risk the jam getting pushed and breaking the seal here. So we want to just fill it to that little line right there. And there's all sorts of gadgets that can help you fill them. I have a really hard time reading. Can I see one of those to show? Thank you. You've got all these like doohickeys that can help you. I don't really love these because I can't really see what I'm doing. I'd rather just go by that line. So I end up turning all my jars, pretend that they're hot. Ooh, they're so hot. So that I can see that little line from this vantage point. Okay, so I'm going to fill my hot jars with the hot jam like this. There we are. Anyone have questions so far? I want to know what kind of jam you guys are making at home. I will show you guys how to fill the wet jars in just a moment. It's the same thing, really. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're
We're good? Okay. So I filled my jar. Oh, it's so hot. And I want to show you what you do next. All right, so I filled it to this point here. It's really lovely. And there's no air bubbles. And you can sometimes tap your jar down to make sure there's no air bubbles. Oxygen is not a good thing for food preservation, right? It can encourage certain molds and bacteria to grow. So we want to keep oxygen and water away. And then I've got some schmutz here on the top. I need to get rid of that because anything that's sitting on the top there is going to disrupt that seal. So I will take a little bit, really clean, like you can use a paper towel if you want to. I'm going to shake this off. And I'm just going to wipe that off, like so. Don't use your finger. Your finger's got bacteria on it. Use something sterile. All right. And I'm going to take my lid here. Can everybody see really well? Right onto the... Okay. So I'm going to put the lid on the jar. And I'm going to close it fingertip tight. I don't want it to be super, super, super tight. Just tight enough for this to hold, right? And now I am ready to water bath can them. So let's talk about this. There's two ways of finishing up, I think we're good, yeah, of finishing up the processing. You cannot take this and put it in the oven and be safe. You have to create a vacuum seal here. You will get some vacuum sealing by filling the hot jar with a hot jam, putting it in there and putting it somewhere warm like maybe the oven, but you really need to create more pressure. So you've got to add pressure to your jar to create the vacuum and to build more pressure in here and kill any possible remaining bacteria inside your jar. This is why I don't love using really big jars. If you've got a really big jar, there's only so many you can fit in here in your water bath canner, which is really just like your tallest pot in your house. And you can only use the water bath system if you've added enough acidity to your jam. So low acid foods like tomatoes without lemon juice are not safe to can in a water bath system. So because we've taken like low acid fruits but added a lot of lemon juice to them, it is safe to use the water bath canning. Some of you may have heard of pressure canners. Not the same thing as a pressure cooker, but a pressure canner will put low acid foods like some pickles and tomato sauce and like butters, like apple butter, and we'll put them in a pressurized system that has a far more pressure and kills any remaining bacteria in here. Yes, question?
Can you use their Instant Pots?
Can you use the Instant Pot? That's a great question that I don't feel like I can give you the answer to. I have heard varying things about this. I would say no, but I could be wrong. So I would Google like Cooperative Extension Program, Instapot canning. So the cooperative extension programs were created by the land grant universities in order to, so basically a lot of the universities across the US received land grants in order to put up these institutions. And in exchange, this is back when agriculture, employed a majority of the US population, taught people how to preserve safely, how to grow more efficiently, lots more technology, and we're really growing the agrarian system. And today, the university cooperative extension programs that come out of these land grants are the ones who are running the Master Food Preserver courses and the courses that teach people to can safely. So, I remember I was going back, oh yes, so they're good resources for figuring out like what's safe, especially with new stuff coming out like Instapots. But just know that Instapot is just a very well branded pressure cooker. It's not like a new invention, and we've always known that pressure cookers don't apply as many PSIs or pressure as pressure canners. So they look kind of the same. A pressure canner is much wider, and it has like a gauge on the top, but it's not quite the same thing. I don't know if that answers your question. All right, so now it is time to take our jar and to process it. This is where you need to think ahead before you start making jam. You don't want to buy any jars that are taller than the tallest pot you own in your house, because in order to create that pressurized seal, you want there to be at least 2 inches of rolling boiling water on top of your jar. Some places sell like these big canning, like water bath canners, or these massive pots that straddle 2 burners. My issue with these is a few fold. One is they're just aluminum, so they can only be used for that. Number two is they're very flimsy and they're very large. So unless you have a we were talking about water bath canning and the need to have at least 2 inches of boiling water above the lid of your jar. And so you want to use a pot that's going to be at least 3 inches taller than your jars. So one thing that you get when you buy one of these like water bath canning systems is it comes with a grate at the bottom so that your glass jars aren't going to move about a lot inside your pot. So I like to create a barrier with a towel. I'll probably get lambasted for this, but this is what I do. I put a towel in there and to create a barrier. And then I'm going to take my jar and place it in the hot boiling water. Okay, I need at least 2 inches of water above the surface of the lid in order to create this seal. So I need to add a bunch more water to this. And I purposely left this down so I could show you how to add the water without compromising the lid. So hold on a second, I'm gonna grab some more water. Hold please. Just a moment. I mean, ideally what you want is to avoid putting anything over the top. I don't want to disrupt this seal. So I'm going to bring more water up top. This should do it. So I need 2 inches of water. And so I'm going to pour the water down the side here and not disrupt this seal. It's going on top. Okay, so if I've got 2 inches of water above the top of the jar, I am going to wait until this comes to a full boil before counting 20 minutes. So depending on, I probably need a little more water in here. Depending on the acidity of your fruit, you're going to need between 10 and 20 minutes to make this safe. I just like to err on the side of 20 minutes. So if you're at high altitude, you're gonna add an extra 10 minutes to this, but 20 minutes after the start of a rolling boil. And then that's it. And I'll show you what to do. We'll do a little magical TV. I just don't want you to ever be afraid of making jam, guys. Because the science can feel complicated and annoying and not your thing, not your jam. But in the end, like if you have the right amount of sugar and lemon juice against the fruit, and that you've cooked it so that it gets to the gel set, you've sterilized your jars well, and you've created this water bath system, then you're going to have a safe jam, okay? I don't want you to like freak out about botulism. When you've hit all those marks, you will be okay, all right? If you're doing low sugar jams, that's when you need to be more careful and perhaps store them in the freezer rather than on the counter or in your pantry. So we're gonna wait till this comes to a roll and boil, and then we're just gonna snap our fingers and pretend like 20 minutes came by, and I'll tell you how to get it out. Any questions right now? Nope, good. So I'm gonna keep a towel here on the counter because I don't want this hot jar to touch the metal surface directly. So I'm just gonna keep that there. And this is again my favorite little tool for this kind of thing.
No Zoom link yet?
Yeah, that isn't it.
Okay, well, she literally just got the phone.
Okay, well then she.
All right, we're almost there. Okay, we're gonna pretend that this is a rolling boil and that it's been rolling for 20 minutes. Cool? So I'm gonna take my tongs. It can feel like you're supposed to use it like this, but you want the rounded edge to circle here, and you're going to grab your jar, like so. I'm gonna wait just a little bit so that Claire can take the phone. Hang on. Can you show the process real quick? I'm gonna grab the jar from the middle of the jar. I don't wanna grab it from the lid here. I don't wanna disrupt that seal. So I'm gonna grab it like this and lift it up without tilting it. This is really important. Don't worry if there's water on top, and just deposit it here. I really wanna make sure, that's perfect, thank you, that I don't disrupt this. So I know it can feel infuriating to see that bit of water on there. Like, don't freak out, just let everything happen. And once everything has cooled off, then you can kind of take a little cloth and just dab it off.
Somebody asked, is there a towel in there?
In there? Yes, there is a towel in there.
Tell them.
Oh yeah, there's a towel in here. It's like a barrier so that I don't get like the metal bouncing up against the jars. And in a lot of cases, you'll find these grates that you can put down in your pot, but that'll compromise the 2 inches of water I have above the lid of the jar. So you want to make sure that you have 2 inches of water above the lid of the jar, probably a little bit more to leave room for rolling boil. So generally 3 inches. But if you're going to put a platform there for your jars, then that can lift it up a little too high. So I just put a towel as a barrier. That is essentially everything. Yes, Claire?
Why do I get a chalky jar after I take it out of boiling water?
Why do you get a chalky jar when you take it out of the water? Do you mean like it just looks like there's some condensation? And does it go away after?
Do you have any experience using lug lids?
No, I don't have any experience using lug lids. With the chalkiness, sometimes it can look like there's some condensation, but that should go away on your jar. I'm not sure. All right, so that is our jam making 101. I'm going to stay on to answer questions that you guys might have in a little bit. So to go back over it, when you're making jam that you want to store safely, like, you know, on your shelf for 6 to 12 months, you have to use the right amount of sugar and lemon juice to fruit. Okay? And without that, then you create an environment where yeast and mold can grow. The most dangerous thing that can happen with your jam is botulism. And botulism is anaerobic. That means it doesn't need oxygen in order to grow. So you want to make sure that you have the right amount of lemon juice and sugar to prevent botulism. Yeah?
So she says there's like a white film around the jar, and then somebody else says chalkiness could be minerals in the water, or
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it's because of hard
It
water.
could be hard water if that doesn't go away. So yeah, you might want to consider getting a filter for your water. All right, let's go over anything else you guys might have questions about. No?
I just asked if there's any more questions.
If you guys have any more questions, let me know. I'm going to stay on a couple more minutes to see if you have any. So we've cooked our jam down. We want to make sure it's nice and thick. We use sterilized jars, and then we finish the water bath. We finish with the water bath, and that's really, really important. You have to create this vacuum seal with your jars, and you need to do that with pressure.
Somebody would like you to fill a wet jar.
Okay, I can fill a wet jar. I'm gonna fake it. Hang on a second. I'm just gonna transfer this. Okay, so this is a jar. I'm just gonna fill it with a jam. Oops. I don't have to worry so much. I have a lot of cleanup to do. About the height here, because the top of a wet jar is glass. It's not going to form a vacuum. So I'm filling it almost all the way to the top. And again, I don't have the little rubber stopper right now. I believe it's at my house. That goes around the lid, but I will show you. There we go. Hang on. So pretend like I have the little rubber stopper that goes around this. I make sure it's tight on there. Make sure your hands are really, really well cleaned before you do this. And again, I take the schmutz off. Make sure you use really like boiling water to do that. And then you shake off the excess water here. And because there is going to be a seal with that rubber part, I make sure to clean that very top as well with a sterile towel. And then, again, that rubber thing goes on the outside here. You close it, and then there's typically, see, I overfilled it. See how we have that here? I overfill this jar, so we have some jam that went up and over. So I would start the process of taking jam out.
Somebody says, I've seen people fill the jars and then put them in the oven for 20 minutes instead of doing the water method. Is that safe?
So it is not recommended to finish your jars in the oven. You're not getting as much pressure as you are from the water bath system. So it is not recommended. I know people have done it successfully, but it doesn't create as long a shelf life nor create an environment where bacteria is going to be threatened, which is what we want. So the short answer to that is preferably you want to use the water bath canning system. And it's a pain in the ass, I'll be honest with you. Like, it is a pain to stand there for 20 minutes and wait for these jars to boil, but it is safer. So if that's all the questions you guys have, I'm gonna log off, but we are taking over till Wednesday. We're gonna put up some fun videos here and there about what to do with seconds. So this evening there'll be one on cobblers and crisps with the seconds from the farmers market that we got on Saturday. And we'll be doing other fun things. Tomorrow's Bestie Day, go France. And so I'll be demonstrating how to make crepe and some other fun things. So stay tuned. Connect with us at Gourmandise LA. You can email us at hotline@thegourmandiseschool.com. I'm on the hotline like all day and all night, so never hesitate to ask. And then you can call our front desk at 310-656-8800. We're open every day but Sunday from 11 to 5, so you can call with your questions. Do not be embarrassed to call. We have heard every question known to man, and we're happy to answer all of them. There's at least 2 chefs on staff at all times here. All of our classes are virtual right now, so you can take everything from a 2-day croissant class to Thai cuisine. We have classes every day but Sunday right now virtually, and we are stocking a lot of yeast and bread flour and all of your baking needs in our little storefront over here on the 3rd floor of Santa Monica Place. I'd like to thank Jody and the whole farmers market team for allowing us to take over today, and Claire for all her help. And I hope that you'll reach out if you have more questions, and let us know if you want us to help you connect with any farmers to get any fruit. So have a great day, and happy canning, and all those good things. Bye.